Alright guys, let's sum up Chapter 12, Reflections, What If, Chance, and Contingency in World History. So let's take a look at some very interesting questions. Might history have been shaped at least at certain points by coincidence, chance, or the decisions of a few? While historians want big picture explanations, often luck or individual acts make up all the difference. What if Ogedai Khan hadn't died in 1241 and the Mongols had continued their advance into Europe? What if China continued maritime exploration after 1433? If they kept sailing, they might have been the ones to discover the Americas. What would this mean for the Portuguese in the Indian Ocean? What if the Ottomans had taken Vienna in 1529? And the Turks are the ones that took Europe. How different would the world be? These are just some insightful alternatives. These scenarios provide insights, and it reminds us that history is not linear and has other possible outcomes. So it's worthwhile to sometimes take a what-if approach to history. Okay, so let's start with the images for Chapter 12. This first one is a portrait of Mehmed II, the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire. Make sure you guys know how to spell his name. Okay, get it off there. Alright, so what overall impression of the Sultan does this portrait represent? Well, the triumphal arch, the sets of crowns, right? The inscription, here and here. It presents him as a powerful ruler and a successful conqueror. The rich textile embedded with the precious stones draped over the foreground wall, and his clothing reflect great wealth. And also, I'm sure you've seen many profile portraits in the past, and that reflects a long tradition of imperial portraiture. There we go. So, this was painted by Gentile Bellini. I think I said his name correctly. It's possible I didn't. Anyway, why might the Muslim ruler want his portrait painted by a Christian artist from Venice? Well, that's interesting. The display of rare and luxury exotic items, that was an important means by which rulers reinforced their status. And thus, a one-of-a-kind work by a well-known foreign artist might have been used, to elevate that status. And the painting may have been commissioned to strengthen relations with Venice, following some type of a treaty. It may have been intended to convey Mehmed's cultural sophistication to Venetians and other Western Europeans who traveled to his court. And it may reflect his own personal interest. So, the candelabra decorating the arch, those were a common feature in Venetian church architecture. And so why might the Sultan, who is a Muslim, have agreed to this element of Christian symbolism in his portrait? Well, as they were primarily a decorative, served a decorative purpose, he may have been unaware of this symbolic meaning. There was no similar tradition of portrait painting in the Muslim world, and so he might have felt the need to draw on Christian symbolism in the image. And he did rule over Christians as well as the Muslim population, so he may have seen this imagery as useful in his interaction with those communities. Okay, the Venetian ambassador visits Damascus. Okay, what impressions of the city and its relationship with Venice does the artist seek to convey? Well, the city appears prosperous, well-kept houses, monuments. It seems well-ordered. It appears clearly defined hierarchies of people are interacting in appropriate contexts. We see a city, bustling city, full of active residents. And it also conveys a sense of the exotic. The camel over here and the deer, right? And the reception of the Venetian delegation by the Mamluk governor also is depicting a cordial, formal relationship between the two states. So think about how the various social groups of Damascus are distinguished from one another. Well, the way that they dress is critical in distinguishing social groups, especially the wearing of specific turbans. As you can see, there are several different types of turbans and turbans of different colors, right? And their activities also distinguish them from each other. Some are engaged in trade, while others stand in attendance of the governor. And even a single figure is depicted mounted on a horse. So in terms of Venetian understanding of urban Mamluk society, it suggests that the Venetians, through their extensive contact, understand both the social hierarchy in Mamluk society and the ways that those social groups displayed their status through the way they dressed. So how would you know that this is a Muslim city? You know, what role, if any, does religion play in this picture of the relationship between Christian Venice and Islamic Damascus? Well, the Umayyad Mosque and the three minarets in the background demark Damascus as a Muslim city. You know, the case could be made that religion plays no meaningful role in the painting, it's just merely appearing in the background. But it could also be made that the minarets in the Umayyad Mosque add a sense of the exotic to the painting, reminding the viewer that Damascus is culturally distinct from Venice. Okay, Aristotle and Averroes. So what might the possession of such a book say about the social status, taste, and the outlook of its owner? Well, you know, this is a high-value luxury item conveying some serious social prestige unto its owner, and purchasing such a richly illuminated version of the text speaks to the owner's interest in art, for sure. And it also speaks to the owner's interest in both the ancient Greek and Islamic philosophical traditions. And, you know, you can easily speculate that the owner of the text was open to philosophical insights beyond those offered just by Christian thinkers. So what overall impression of Renaissance thinking about the classical world and the world of Islam does this painting convey? And that's a very interesting question. Well, the fact that it's richly decorated with Aristotle's text in his printing, that indicates that his writings were highly valued. Ibn Rushud's commentaries were also included, and that indicates that the Islamic interpretations of the classical texts were valued in Renaissance Europe, and that's something that we've talked about. And even the depiction of Aristotle and Ibn Rushd at the top of the page visually shows the role of Islamic scholars in transmitting those ancient Greek texts with interpretive insights to the West. And, you know, really overall, this page reveals a very positive view of both the classical world and the world of Islam. It's a beautiful image. But notice the gestures of the two men at the top of the page, as well as the pen in Ibn Rushd's hand and the book at his feet. So, you think about maybe the relationship between them and if that is showing something about their relationship. Because it's almost like he's portrayed as the student of Aristotle. But one might also interpret him as the clarifier of Aristotle. You know, the pen and the book may represent his role in annotating the text, right? Because they lived in different time periods. And metaphorically, Ibn Rushd could be seen as recording what he has gained from his quote-unquote conversation with Aristotle. And that's an interesting thought. And it's all subject to interpretation. Okay, St. George baptizes the pagans of Jerusalem. So this is an interesting painting. What posture toward the Islamic world does this painting represent? Does it convey resistance to the Ottoman expansion, or does it hold out the hope for a peaceful conversion of such a powerful empire? Well, it represents a missionary posture. That's a possibility, right? Actively seeking to convert the Muslim empire to the Christian faith. And it would be reasonable to presume that this scene depicts the baptizing of willing converts, given celebratory musicians are marking what seems to be a festive occasion. That's also possible. However, St. George as a warrior saint complicates the scene. It would be possible to interpret the painting as the baptizing of a defeated ruler and his followers. So that's interesting. But what is the significance of the large Ottoman turban at the foot of the steps? Well, this turban undoubtedly belongs to, a bareheaded ruler being baptized. As such, it may represent the casting off of his worldly status in the Islamic world to become a member of the Christian church. That's an interesting thought. It might also convey the overcoming of Ottoman power by Christian forces if the ruler being baptized was defeated by St. George. So why might the legend of St. George provide a potent symbol for European interaction with the Islamic world, especially in the circumstances of the early 16th century? Well, St. George's role was in converting pagans. His marital reputation as a warrior saint, martial reputation as a warrior saint who converted through his inspiration of heroic deeds. And his heroic deeds took place in North Africa, which is now a Muslim region. That's an interesting thought. Okay, this one by Giovanni de Modena, Muhammad in Hell. I think this is a very interesting picture and obviously subject to a lot of interpretation. But how does this fresco depict hell? What does this larger context of the fresco as a whole suggest about Modena's view of Muhammad? That's an interesting thought, because maybe that's what this painting is about. Hell is a terrible place where the sinful are tormented before they are fed to Satan. Right? In terms of Modena's view, he clearly feels that Muhammad's revelations were false and that he was not a true prophet. And Muhammad was in hell suffering torments for his false teachings. And that's pretty intense. So how does this image differ from that of St. George baptizing the pagans? This one. I think that's an interesting thought, particularly in its posture toward Islam. Well, this particular image attacks Islam as a false faith, right, by presenting its founder as being tormented in hell. And by emphasizing conversion in this painting, right, this is an emphasis on conversion, it presents the possibility of redemption for the followers of Islam, even if it still condemns their faith by equating it with pagan faiths, which the early church encountered. Italian Muslims have long objected to this image, noting that Islam portrays Jesus in a very positive light. And in 2002, a radical group linked to Al-Qaeda plotted to blow up the church to destroy the offending portrayal of their prophet. So what particular objections do you imagine motivated the Muslim opposition to this element of this fresco? Well, they undoubtedly objected to a depiction of their faith's prophet in hell being tormented by demons, right? And many Muslims believe that it is wrong to create any depiction of Muhammad let alone one of him in the nude being tormented by demons. Find that pretty offensive, don't they? That's definitely a possibility. But I think it's just a very interesting picture. And those are all of the visuals and the reflections for Chapter 12. I'll see you again for Chapter 13, the early modern world. That's Part 4. Chapter 13 is about political transformations, 14 economic transformations, and Chapter 15 are cultural transformations. Part 4 is a great unit. Alright, see you later.